Joining me now is General Manager from Jupiter Systems, Justin Shong. Justin, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Now, you and I have had some conversations before about the state of digital signage and digital display. You know, if we were to have this conversation even 5 years ago, we would be talking about completely different applications. Just give me a quick understanding of where the digital signage and digital display market is today.
I think, from both a manufacturer and a content provider market or aspect, we've gotten to the point where we can put really big monitors and really big displays pretty much anywhere. The trick now is how do we entice, be it a worker in a corporate environment or a passerby in an airport or somebody in a retail location who's looking at the display to actually bother to pay attention to what you're showing on the screen. Right, we're competing for those eyeballs in seconds, as opposed to 5 years ago or 10 years ago. If you had a monitor sit someplace that people didn't expect, you drew people's attention just by the fact that it was there. But today, the content has to be compelling. It has to be unique. It has to be attention grabbing. That's going to get your attention like that, because there are so many other things competing for those eyeballs, including this, that everybody's walking around with their head down and their nose in all the time anyway. So it really is gone from, hey, we can put monitors everywhere and we drive content to it, to now we got to figure out how to actually populate those devices with things that are compelling for the consumer.
Well, you talk about kind of the distinction there between the technology and the content. Obviously, the content being probably something where there's a lot more flexibility in the long term. But as far as the technology side goes,
sure,
where do you think we are in the life cycle of digital displays, right? Obviously, we can always increase resolution. We can kind of sort of play with aspect ratios for the most part. But would you say that we've actually reached almost a tipping point in the technology where we've tapped a lot of our resources?
Nah, because I think there's always new stuff coming down the pipe. I think what Jupiter is bringing to market in our, different aspect ratio and some of the innovations we have with direct view LED are, incrementally moving us along that path. So we can always get thinner. We can always, like you said, be more immersive in terms of more pixels on the screen. We've got our wider aspect ratio that we're sort of unique in the marketplace with. We've got some interactive features in our direct view LED, but there are things on the horizon where we're seeing, foldable displays and rollable displays and things that you wallpaper on a wall practically, and translucent displays. So there's these continuing innovations coming from, the really smart people who are developing and designing these. And I think there's, always, it's that competing for the eyeballs and trying to gain the attention of the consumer who's either going to spend the money in the store or respond to an advertising or do something along those lines. So I don't think we're anywhere near the end of it, right? I mean, go to Blade Runner if you really want to, and the holograms are going to reach out and grab you in 15 or 20 years. You have all of those things that people are considering and envisioning now, and now it's building the technology to catch up with everybody's imagination.
Well, hey, and technology is nothing without a little elbow grease and creativity.
Exactly.
So let's talk about some of those next steps in interactivity, right? Is it
Sure.
Obviously you guys have some great tools that have embedded cameras inside the displays, but are we moving towards a more all-in-one installation, or are we what are some of the things practically that we're actually looking at on the next steps in interactivity?
So if you talk about, I can talk about my direct view LED that we're bringing to market in probably Q3 this year, that has a camera embedded in the screen, and it's invisible to the user. We don't have to blow any pixels out in order to put the aperture in there. And we can put any number of cameras in a video wall installation. And then from there, it's really about what you do with the data, and whether that data is a video feed coming out of that camera or sensor information or 3D modeling or, all sorts of different things you can do, smart transcripts and smart reporting of what people are doing while they're standing in front of the screen, gesture control, facial recognition, all sorts of AI and machine learning kind of tools you can throw on top of that sensor information coming out of there, that you can then do some really cool stuff with. Some of the things that we've talked with some of our partners about are things like, we build an installation, and this one's actually a little past the conceptual stage at this point. The cameras will 3D model the person who or people who are standing in front of the screen, right? So you walk up in front of it. We've got multiple cameras all over the place that are 3D modeling it. It's feeding into a desktop computer at this point. Where I would have said a supercomputer 10 years ago, but it's a desktop computer at this point. 3D models, it renders an avatar of that person and injects them back on the video feed in front of the user that's standing in front of there. And maybe we change the clothes they're wearing, put them in a football uniform, put them in if it's in a football stadium, put them in a, fire suit and a helmet. If it's in a racing environment, those sorts of things where you really do grab that person and suck them into that world in a very, very kind of comprehensive way that you really have their attention at this point. And now it's about the marketing message behind it in order to get the dollars out of their wallet.
Well, so let me ask this. I know that Jupiter's done, really your bread and butter is large scale enterprise installations, right?
Correct.
Almost literally, if not literally, helping send people to the moon. Is there a real practical application for some of the stuff like that in, your mission critical, your mission control environments? Is it really kind of just almost the prosumer level, or is that something really that you anticipate scaling up to the big boys?
Well, if you look at what Jupiter's done over the years, right? We were founded 40 years ago. And we really did invent the video wall processor per se. So we were the first people to put multiple images on a wall from a computer back in 1981. And we did it as a custom project for our UCSF Medical Center. And since then, we've kind of continued to innovate in there. And now our largest system has somewhere north of 100,000 inputs. We don't have an exact count because it keeps changing, and about 1,000 outputs into 16 different control rooms scattered around a medium-sized country that runs all of their emergency response systems. So if you had asked us 10 years ago, is that something that's possible? Nobody would have thought it was possible. And so we, continue to push the envelope, and people continue to, I think, designers and some of the creative types and even the technology types go, hey, what if we could do this? Or what if we could do that? And part of what our job as technologists are providing the tools for then people to use their imagination and take that science fiction-y piece and say, we could do this with it. So in the control room space where we've had, our bread and butter, we're sort of the de facto leading indicator, if you will. There is a transition from multiple LCD walls to some combination of LCD and direct view LED. So putting our camera equipped direct view LED, and by the way, that LED is also the only active matrix refresh LED. So it makes it a lot easier to look at on a long-term basis and gets you away from the kind of migraine inducing stuff that some direct view LED does. And then we allow the customers that we're dealing with and the consultants to envision what they really want to do. And they're going to come to us with all sorts of different stuff. The 3D modeling thing that I talked about a couple minutes ago, we hadn't even considered. But when we had our partner in here, he kind of went, it was a guy who had done a lot of kind of conceptual things over the years. He goes, I could do this, and this would be awesome. And it's going to go grab people. And he's got a history of success with those sorts of innovations. We went, yeah, seems pretty possible. Not hard to do, really. It's getting that next step of that innovation. So putting the camera in the screen is relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. And then you have that sensor and you have the data to do with what you want. What was Bill Gates saying? Nobody's going to need more than mega memory at one point. It's the same sort of thing. Is we're going to provide the tools that then somebody can build another platform that sits on top of it that does some really cool things.
Ironically, as you talk about some of these enterprise installations, really the thing that stands out to me the most, especially really in recent times, is how well a lot of this technology actually scales down, right? We're talking UCC applications now in this world of, we'll call it post-COVID for lack of a better term, but the UCC market really is ready and primed for a lot of these technologies. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing in that market, specifically really in more the enterprise installation world.
Sure. So in the enterprise UCC space, we've got Teams and Zoom on the desktop. And traditionally you had Polycom, Cisco, maybe Lifesize, Tandberg in the conference room. And they were very different experiences. As the whole new shifting paradigm of return to work has happened, and the future of the work environment, and it was starting with the open office spaces, but with COVID, it's really changed a lot in terms of more of a library type environment where it's not only is it open floor plan, but it's sort of open attendance where people come in when they need to, and then they leave and they go do their emails and their expense reports when they're at home. We're dragging people back into the office, and the traditional, MCU-based room systems that came from Cisco and Polycom are sort of falling out of favor a little bit. People are going to Microsoft Teams or Zoom in the conference room. And what was really designed as a desktop environment, people said, well, we'll just put it on a big monitor and it'll look the same. And it really doesn't give you the same experience, because the desktop environment, we're 18 inches to 2 feet away from the screen. So that when you share content, the content and even the self-view image comes down to a thumbnail, but you can see it because you're that close. When you put that size thumbnail on a big screen, when you're 12, 14 feet away from it in a conference room, you lose all eye contact, the entire point of having a video conference. All you're doing is basically sharing content at that point, and having an audio call. Microsoft and Zoom and some of the other providers have started to build these, room appliances that give you more of that room-based feel and take advantage of the real estate that's in the room. And so what we're doing at Jupiter is we're saying that's great. We've got the perfect platform or the perfect canvas to paint that on, if you will. And that's really our PANA 21:9 aspect ratio, ultra widescreen monitors. So we've got a 105-inch monitor that's about 8'4" across and about 3.5 feet tall. And we've got an 81-inch, it's a little over 6 feet wide and almost 3 feet tall. But it helps with the layout, and Microsoft in particular, in some of their publications are talking about ultra widescreen immersive environments, because it really does suck you back into it and really does bring you back, engage the user. It's the same as digital signage. We're still fighting for their eyeballs, because the people who are sitting in the conference room still have their laptops open and their emails are still going off and their IMs are still buzzing and they're still getting text messages, and you're still fighting for their attention. We're not dragging it from, a competitor. We're dragging it from their phone that they're getting a text or they're getting a call about. And the more compelling image you have in front of them and the more compelling tools you have, the better engaged your users are going to be. And the more likely they are to return to the office, as opposed to stay on their couch in their flannels and do all their work from their laptop. So the PANA is kind of that perfect platform that teams with, no pun, or maybe a little bit of pun intended, that teams with a room-based system to give you that immersive experience. And so we're really excited about how that's going into the market today, what it's doing in terms of, everybody says revolutionize, and I think revolutionary would be a hologram. To evolve the conference room experience and to evolve the corporate and the room experience, so that forward-looking companies can actually entice their workers to come back into the office. Because the whole reason for video conferencing is this eye-to-eye communication and collaboration, and the fact that maybe 1 + 1 = 3 when we're working together. And we've seen, reports from a lot of companies. As soon as the pandemic started, they're like, our employees are going to work from home and our productivity is going to suck because of it, but we're going to do it because it protects people. Well, we're getting past the protecting people now. We've got the tools in place in order to keep people safe. Now we have to pry those people back out of their home office or their home and get them back so that their productivity can go back up. And giving the organizations the proper tools to do that, in my opinion, is one of the big ways you're going to, make people want to come back to the office, as opposed to try to force them back in. And, forcing people to do things these days is, it's a losing battle.
Well, interestingly, Justin, these are conversations that a lot of people are having for the first time. And what I mean by that really is specifically what kind of the pandemic has done and the advent of technologies like NDI, AV over IP, things like that is what we've done is we've brought in really an entirely new market of users, of installers, of decision makers in the IT communities. Reconcile with me for a second how somebody who's focused a little bit more on the IT side of things is more worried about hey, we need to make sure we're making eye contact, making more AV minded decisions versus traditional cabling and infrastructure decisions.
Well, I think AV and IT are merging in a big way, and have for a long time. They were merging before pre-pandemic. If you look at I'll go back to Jupiter's history for a minute. We introduced AV over IP in 2006. We were using it for a different application, but if you look at people like Crestron with NVX and some of the other commercial platforms, everybody from Evertz to whoever are using IP to transport AV signals. It's a network play for the most part, right? And the collaboration appliances, whatever they are, right? It's a room system. It's a desktop collaboration appliance. It's, our laptops, whatever. Those are the endpoints. So the endpoints are becoming, corporate real estate facilities sort of thing where they're responsible for that. But IT is controlling them just like they're doing desktop support at this point. All of those devices are hanging on the network. All of them are accessible via the network and at least in some way, shape, or form manageable via the network. So it really is coming together, and it's, the C-level folks, if you talk to a CIO, I've talked to more than my share over the years, but even pre-pandemic, their number one concern, right? And it doesn't matter who at the C-level, their number one concern is their employees. It's attracting and retaining talent. Every company that's going to survive, that has survived, is going to survive, knows that their most important asset is their people. And how do we attract and retain that talent? And so you're from the top, you're getting things pushing down, like, some companies are saying, we're going to provide the best tools and the best experience, whether it's a sleep pod and a foosball table, or, great tools for people to work on because the workforce is changing, people consume information differently. Whatever it is, the folks who are running these organizations are thinking that way. And then if that is kind of trickling down, as it were, to, the managers and the directors and the implementers at the IT or AV level, and that's kind of coming together. I mean, we used to have telephony groups and IT groups, and we don't anymore. It's all become IT. AV is going to be the same way. AV for a long time was a little bit of a black box, especially around control systems. Things were not plug and play, and it allowed AV integrators to remain separate. But, I spent 4 years at an AV integrator before I came to Jupiter, running the West Coast for Whitlock. When you scrape the surface of what we did, we were a low voltage electrical contractor that pulled cable and installed this. And then we serviced and maintained the systems on behalf of our partners who were, AV groups reporting up to IT anyway. So it has, I think that merger has already happened. Now it's just people understanding that it has happened and how do we best go forward from it.
I think you make an interesting point, and I'll disagree with you a little bit, is that I don't think the merger of telecom per se and IT is going or was as seamless as the integration between AV and IP. As much as I want it to be, but here's why. I think one of the things that we miss as an AV community, and you talked about being from an integrator, right? I think a lot of times we have this idea where we can just strip creativity from the process, right? Yeah. We exist in this world where you talked about it, right? Content on display screens is important as it's ever been, but functionality and interest in engaging your people is something that realistically is going to be a challenge. So talk to me, one of the things that I've seen a little bit more, you probably see as well, is those IT decision makers actually looking towards the AV integrators to bring some of that creativity, because on their own, really, it's not something that is right now appears to be as seamless as we'd like it to be.
Well, it's seamless from the top of the mountain, right? It might
From
not
a
be
signal flow
seamless.
Standpoint, sure, yes.
It might not be seamless on the implementation side, right? And you know, at the AV integrator, what did you hear from our when you got an audience with a decision maker at a large enterprise, he would tell me literally all the time, AV is 10% of my budget and 90% of my headache. Right. And you would also
that is the absolute pinpoint of what AV is right now.
But you would also get the folks in the doers in AV, right? The influencers, the implementers, maybe not the guys who are writing the check, but the folks who are responsible on a day-to-day basis. Their number one goal was not to get a service ticket, right? It was to provide continuity because the users expected it to operate like a telephone. And they went, it's got to be 5 nines. And if it's not 5 nines, it's your fault. And I'm going to yell at everybody. And I don't want to get an angry phone call from somebody to do this. So you do pull some of that creativity out of it. You pull some of that kind of forward thinking out of it. But I really do believe that the push kind of back to being a little more engaging and a little more immersive and a little more creative is happening outside of the folks who are trying to keep it, 5 nines kind of reliable. It's always that balance between, usability and functionality, right? If you look at, there's some platforms in the AV space that are spectacularly comprehensive from a digital whiteboard standpoint. You can't get the average user to walk up to that thing if you paid them $1 million, right? Because if it's somebody who's using it all day, every day, they can make them sing and dance and it's so complex and has so many bells and whistles and features and whatever, but the average user won't touch it because it won't work for them, right? And it's like, the power, I'll go back to this one, right? Because this has become the gold standard for all of us. The power on a phone is that I don't need a manual, right? Manuals are a sign of weakness. And if you have to write a manual, you failed as a manufacturer or a technology company to do that. So we have to balance those two competing interests. But at the same time, while the doers and the implementers are trying to balance those two competing interests, the rest of the people in the organization, the people who actually, do the accounting and sell the stuff and screw it together and design the next generation of stuff, are looking at this going, well, I can work here, or I can work here, or I can work here. What's going to give me the best environment? What's going to allow me to grow and be the most creative, and make me the most engaged so I can invent, cure cancer or invent the next great widget and keep me employed there. And that's a different kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Incentive or goal than the folks who just want to keep it reliable and easy to use. Because if it was just reliable and easy to use, we might as well stick with a pen and a piece of paper. So those competing interests, but when you look at it from the top, that what's driving it is, how do I get talent, right? And how do I attract these people and get them to stay and not, decide they're going to drop out of the workforce to follow their bliss and go be beet farmers or to go do whatever they're going to do. And we're seeing a huge drop of people in the workforce, especially in the knowledge worker space, who just said, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go do whatever I want to do. And millions of people are dropping out every month. So companies are fighting for talent. We've been fighting for talent all along. Now it's about, what else can I do besides money? Because it's not just money that makes people want to work places. It's the environment, it's the tools, it's the opportunity to be successful. And as a technology provider, part of what we're doing is providing those bits for the organization then to layer on the sleep pods and the espresso machines and the unlimited PTO and whatever else they do to pull their employees in and to keep them.
Look, this is why I love having you on the show, Justin. We started about talking digital signage and digital display and end up talking about retaining talent. Hey, there's nobody better to talk about it. You guys over at Jupiter are crushing it on a very consistent basis. But hey, we appreciate you coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Shong from Jupiter Systems. Justin,
Thanks,
we are so appreciative for your time. Thank you.
I love chatting with you. So we'll talk soon.